Hey, I'm Di Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience and achievement of women from all walks of life. In each episode, I pose questions to my guests to peel away the layers to reveal the knowledge and the experience that shapes their narrative. So if you're feeling unseen, unheard, or simply looking for inspiration, then the Power of Women podcast is a great place to join the conversation.
I'm a behavioural scientist and leadership mentor and coach to women around the globe. I'm on a quest to empower 1 million women to own their expertise, elevate their impact, and live their legacy. What I love about being over or almost 50 is that I give less fucks. Full stop.
Hey, I'm Di Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. And thank you for a powerful start. So look, I've headhunted probably hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 30 years. And some people are really surprised when they're approached. Others are not surprised because their egos expect this along their career journey. Some feel that they're well and truly ready for the opportunity. And then there's always those who self-doubt, don't feel they're ready for the opportunity. And let me tell you, more often than not, the person who doesn't believe they're suitable or fully equipped for the role for which they've been approached is a female. And that is just one of the topics today that we're going to cover in the podcast with behavioural scientist Penny Locaso. Penny, welcome to the Power of Women.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been really excited to come along.
Penny, you have a statement on your website that says women of impact are made, not born. What do you mean by that?
That statement was born out of the research that I've recently undertaken. So one of the things, to your point, is I was very curious about, one, women who were experts in their field doubting themselves as experts and not calling themselves that. And so as behavioural scientists, the first place I went was to the evidence to understand what makes someone an expert, and why so few women were willing to call themselves an expert and the ramifications of that. And what I found when I looked to the literature was that I wanted to understand the definition of expert. And in the definition of expert, there was a lot of information around what makes an expert. And it was fascinating because I think we have in society this misnomer that experts are born. Yeah, it's like genius. It's born. It is already in you from the start point, and then you expand upon it.
Which is madness because it's an acquisition of knowledge over time, is it not?
It's exactly that. And so I think women, again, it's unconscious, but I think it's like, oh, I've never been that, so therefore I am not that, regardless of how much applied knowledge and skill I have built over time, no matter how much experience. And so when I found that out and dove into creating my white paper, Hidden Figures, I was like, I think we need to really call this out. And women were not driven or motivated by wanting to be experts. What they were motivated by was wanting to have an impact and leave the world a better place. So I created this statement around women of impact are made, not born, so that they could see that it was possible for them.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. Penny, let's wind back a little bit and just get a bit of an understanding what brought you to the now, because you were previously a corporate executive within a global multinational. What changed?
So 10 years ago now, I had ticked all the boxes I was told would make me happy/successful. I always say I had the executive career in the global giant, I had the nuclear family, I even had the white picket fence. Yeah, but what was really interesting to me was at the age of 39, whilst I ticked all the boxes, inside I felt unfulfilled And equally, I look back now and I know I was completely burnt out. I was getting sick all the time. And there was this moment where I stepped into the backyard one afternoon. I had Fridays off. I used to work part-time, which meant that I actually worked 6 days a week. I just used to squeeze it into every other day so that I could be with my young son, who was only 3. And one day I stepped into the backyard and I said to him, come hang out and we'll do something in the kitchen. And he said to me, I can't, Mum, I'm too busy. And it was like a dagger through the heart. It was like all of it kind of came into that moment, everything that I'd been feeling. And I stepped back and I was like, how does a 3-year-old know what busy is?
Well, I was going to say, do you think he actually knew that, or it was just paraphrasing a phrase?
It was him watching us being busy, saying we were busy, and then him saying, well, I'm going to use that because that's what they use. It's a validation. And so I was like, one, how does a 3-year-old learn this? It's through what they hear from their parents. 2, what does busy tell a 3-year-old in terms of how important they are in your life? And equally, what the hell am I doing? So I asked myself, what does happiness/success look like for me on my terms? And quite honestly, for the first time in a long time, I felt like my heart spoke back to me, and it was positively impacting the lives of others, sharing experiences, being present and in a moment, and being humanly connected. And all of those things were being sidelined. And so I turned my life completely upside down in pursuit of happiness so that I could recalibrate my life towards having more of those 4 things and being there for this small person and not being busy. And so that looked like leaving a 16-year career as an executive and relocating my family from Perth back to Melbourne as a female with high potential, which I cannot stand that term. I'm yet to meet a female with no potential, but that's what they used to call us in corporate. I left an 18-year relationship and I started my own purpose-driven company because I knew I wasn't the only woman in the world.
It's a lot of changes at one time.
Yeah. But I have a theory, I don't advocate it, but to be honest, it was almost like containing the pain because there are certain things in your life that are so disruptive when you sort of pull the rug out from underneath you.
You condense it.
It's almost like it can't get any worse. It's like a ceiling to how hard it is. That's how it felt for me anyway. So it's like do it all at once.
And you made an interesting point before about being happy and successful as defined by an organisation as opposed to being defined on your terms. And you said to me off camera that you felt that your success had been defined by others rather than yourself.
Absolutely.
So what's that trigger point, that a realisation that it's actually they're telling me that it's not my terms, apart from your son?
I always say it wasn't like a light being turned on. It was more like a dimmer that gradually got turned up over time. So it was interesting how I started to notice things in the workplace that I believe had always been there, but that I had just ignored, that were incongruent with my values.
You mentioned burnout, so you were going through it, but like many of us, we don't recognise what it is. We just recognise it's getting tougher and tougher and tougher as the cogs start to grind.
So I have Crohn's disease. So I just put down constantly being sick every month.
To that.
And I always say, I remember, when I look back now how insane this was, I never took a sick day, but I remember I'd be at home working in my bed, with the box of tissues, coughing up a lung, and still being proud of the fact that I was getting shit done.
Yeah. I did that many times. Aren't we mad? I mean, seriously, aren't we mad?
But when you're in it, and I see it in my clients all the time now, we normalise operating in overdrive. And when you normalise something, you can't, it's like me, I couldn't see it until I was out the other side and I was like, how crazy. I don't get sick like that anymore, even though I have Crohn's for the rest of my life. I never have been as sick as what I was in corporate, as frequently.
So that fed the Crohn's, and the Crohn's then fed this view of, or the burnout fed the view that you're going to blame elsewhere, rather than the reality of what was going on.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that was really, when I kind of did make the massive shift, there was a real light bulb moment for me. It was like, this is right. Because when I left corporate, everyone said to me I was crazy. They were like, why would you leave what we now call golden handcuffs? Why would you leave the safety, the security? And back then, people weren't leaving like they do today. Right?
Yeah.
And they were like, you're crazy. And it was funny, the more they told me I was crazy, the more I was like, I don't know why, but I just need to do this. And probably about 3 months after I left, I started to connect into different networks that I'd never come across, like purpose-driven entrepreneurs. Again, that was very early in that sort of movement, whereas now it's the thing.
Yeah, it's a bigger community.
And I came across this whole concept out of the US around conscious capitalism, and this idea that you could do good in the world, you could have a business that was there to make the world a better place, make the lives of others better, and you could make money from it. And I went to a big conference around this in Sydney, run by a famous guy called Raj Sisodia, who was the founder of conscious capitalism, and it just blew my mind. And I was like, this is where I want to be. I don't know what it looks like, but this is where I want to be.
Yeah, I've arrived. So since that time, you've focused all your energies on developing businesses or investing in platforms that are specifically for women, as I understand it. And you're a behavioural scientist, as you said in your introduction. As a professional, what do you believe are some of the things holding women back from advocating for themselves? How long have we got?
Self-belief, lack of self-belief. If I had $1 for every time I heard a smart, amazing, competent woman say, I've got this dream, but who am I to think I can? Where does that come from? Who am I to think and I'm like, well, who are you to think you can't?
Where do we think that comes from?
I honestly think that it comes from societal conditioning. And I still think it comes back to the basics of how we raise boys versus girls. Okay. And especially women of our generation, it's definitely changing now because a lot of people are raising their children gender neutral, which I think helps. But the reality is you can do that, but there's still a lot going on in our world that's like you're a girl and you're this, and therefore, So we are, from our generation, we were raised to be good girls. Don't rock the boat. Don't be loud. Don't be difficult. Don't be outspoken, because like they say, women now that are outspoken get criticised no end. Like a man who speaks up and out is like, oh, he's powerful, he's assertive. She's a complainer. She's a whinger. She's a bitch. Like I hate the term, but it's the truth. So what happens is we are held to a completely different standard. And that standard is generally about make sure you make others happy, which leads into people-pleasing perfectionism, which I see so much in my high-performing clients, and don't rock the boat. And whether you like it or not, that creates an unconscious imprint in your brain. And that imprint will inform your behaviour for the rest of time unless you go in and go, what is stopping me? Where does this belief system come from? Because that's all it is. It's not a fact, it's a belief. And what do I need to do to reshape it if I truly want to live a life that is in alignment with who I want to be and how I want to show up in the world and the impact I want to have?
And working with your clients, how long does it take for a client to realise that they've got these limitations on themselves, imposed by themselves?
I think it's pretty quick. When you hold the mirror up. I'm very direct and no bullshit, which I believe you're pretty much the same.
I'm pretty much the same. I recognise that in you, Penny. You recognise that in me.
And that's, I think, why, my clients seek me out. I'm not here to blow smoke up someone's backside. I am here to hold the mirror up and say, you're with me for a reason. I don't want you to be with me forever. So let's hold the mirror up. Let's look at what's holding you back. Let's look at why it's holding you back. And then let's look at what we need to do from a mindset perspective to shape a different story, to create a different narrative. And I think the most powerful experience I've had in this domain, I've studied psychology. I've worked in the domain of human behaviour for a very long time now. But studying trauma with Dr. Gabor Mate over the last sort of 18 months has been profound in understanding how our experiences when we're children continue to inform our behaviour for the rest of our lives. And if we don't challenge the stories we tell ourselves, we are leaving a load of potential on the table. And it's very hard to live the lives that we want to live.
Mm. So many people have sat in that chair and said something exactly the same or similar to. So it's
Validation.
undeniable.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, coming up, we're going to explore more about your relationship with the word that we started with, expert. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump on to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. So, Penny, we know, well, the research suggests that when a man's applying for a job, he's happy to put his hand up when he's only ticks 3 out of 10 of the boxes. Women feel they need to be 100% suited before they put their hand up. That's what the research is saying. Is that actually still the case?
I think it's definitely still the case. And I looked into this when I was doing my white paper, and it's actually not research. It was a finding by Hewlett Packard, I think like 15 years ago, that kind of, it stuck because it resonated so much with people. So even though there's not empirical data to support it, the fact that it's so resonant and it still is spoken about to this day says to me how true it is for so many of us. I think, has it changed? No, it has. In what I see, absolutely not. Like I said, I work with
Hasn't from my chair.
high performing, like really amazing women, and they continue. Again, we came to the point before around women doubting themselves and asking themselves, who am I to think I can? Women constantly telling me that they don't have enough to be the thing yet. They don't have enough to call themselves an expert yet. And when we ask them what enough looks like and what boxes they need to tick, they don't know.
So is that self-doubt, or is that a higher level of perfectionism or expectation?
I think it's probably a bit of both. It's definitely a high level of expectation, because what we found in the Hidden Figures research was that women were like, well, I haven't ticked all the boxes yet to be the thing. Then we asked them what boxes they needed to tick. They didn't know. So I was like, okay, then let's look at the women that you look up to as role models in this domain. Who do you consider an expert, right? And they would give me a name. So Brené Brown came up quite a bit. And it's like, okay, so what is it in your eyes that makes Brené Brown an expert? And they gave me the checklist, like literally the checklist of what makes an expert in the eyes of a woman. I went and created that checklist, and you can download it on my website, so that women actually had the boxes to be able to tick, so that we could remove that barrier, right? So it's called the expert checklist. You can download it. So remove that barrier. You've got the boxes you need to tick. And so it's one, they want to know which boxes they need to tick, but two, in regards to the definition and the women that they looked at, like Brené Brown, what we found was that the standard they held Brené to was completely different to what they expected of themselves. So one of the key things that they loved about Brené Brown was the fact that she didn't profess to know it all. And she was very open in her mistakes and learning from them and sharing that in the service of others. And when I asked women off the back of that, okay, so what is it that you're missing? What box haven't you ticked yet? And they would say to me, I don't know it all. And so there was a complete incongruence between what they admired in the experts that they looked up to
expectations
and what they expected of themselves. So how do you close that gap? Other than, again, holding the mirror up?
Wind back to when they were 7, I think, is probably the answer to that, so, because of all of that conditioning. So in getting to this point that the word expert was going to be where your research was, did you rule out anything else before you landed on expert?
I wanted to create a body of work that shone a light on a barrier that was holding women back that had previously not had light on it. And I think there has been so much work around gender equality. There has been so much research around women in leadership, which is great. But there was nothing, when I looked into all of the research, there was nothing around how a woman's relationship with the word expert impacted her ability to become one. Yet there was a lot of data around the fact that less than 30% of voices globally in the media were female, and equally less than 20% of voices on stages were women globally. And so what we knew from the data was that there was a significant gap of women's voices being heard in places of influence and power. Yet we are 50% of the population. So think about how that influences government policy, health funding, like all of these things, childcare, these things that women need when our voices aren't heard.
So of the women that you've approached to take part in the study, did anybody self-profess to be an expert already?
One woman out of 21. So it was qualitative research, and it was one woman. And it was only when I said to her, would you call yourself an expert? She sat there and she really had to think about it, like it wasn't an instant response. And she said to me, yes, I am, because Smart Company told me I was. And I thought this was so, look at your face, so interesting. So this was the other thing that I found from the research. I still get goosebumps when I say this out loud.
I've got goosebumps with you saying it.
When someone else calls us an expert, we are more likely to believe we are the thing, but we need the validation of someone else to say we are the thing in order to be the thing.
So this is interesting. So I will clearly self-proclaim to be a subject matter expert pertaining to what is now almost my former career as an executive search specialist within the retail and consumer space. And I have no qualms in stating I'm a subject matter expert. Is there a difference in stating and containing it to a subject versus just expert, or is it one and the same thing?
I would take subject out of it. I feel like it diminishes. And this is the other thing women are very good at, okay? The reality is you are an expert in something, okay? And so just saying, I am an expert. And so for me, I am an expert in impact making and human flourishing. That is where my expertise lie. That is where my passion is. And I don't think that will ever change. I might change how I deliver it, and
depending on the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that is the foundation of the expertise I have built up. Because really we're all subject matter. No one's an expert in everything.
No.
Everyone is a subject.
It's subject matter.
Yeah. But I would just say I am an expert and this is what I am an expert in. I just freaking own it.
Interesting. I've never thought of myself as diminishing my statement, but now I do. So thank you, Penny.
But it's like women always say just. The word just, I'm just.
Yeah, which is a diminishing phrase.
Correct. I think we're very good at toning. It's funny.
Toning it down. I'm not very good at toning it down, but yeah.
Well, it's the humble brag. Let's talk about this. This is fascinating. So many women, when they have these amazing successful moments, will get on something like LinkedIn. I see this all the time. And it's like, a humble brag. Like that's what they predicate it with. A humble brag.
I couldn't read beyond that.
I did this thing. They do it all the time, okay? Or so they diminish the significance of what they have achieved. Recently, I wrote an article off the back of my research. I was invited to write a half-page article for the Australian Financial Review on hidden figures. Now, it's hard enough to get in the AFR, to get half a page and get them to ask you to write it. I was like, this is amazing,
well done.
Right? I am an expert.
Yeah.
And I put that on LinkedIn and I said, a not so humble brag. I am fully owning the fact that the reason I got this opportunity is because I am an expert, and I'm damn freaking proud of the fact that I spent the last 5 months of my life doing research that is fundamentally shifting the way a woman looks at her relationship with the word expert so she can use it as the pathway to the impact that she seeks to have. I encourage you to fully own any successes you have and share them without any humbleness, because men don't diminish any of their successes.
No.
And again, it doesn't make the play. It puts us on a lower base, and it is problematic. It's problematic because,
Do you know, it's interesting. So coming into today, I've been having and Jack, I'll call it out, it's to you. It's a humorous conversation over Facebook, and this particular individual is a fabulous supporter of Power of Women. And there was something that I wrote this week, and it was a bit of a poke the bear moment, and he challenged whether is it becoming gender inequality in reverse, which we're at risk of doing if we over-index all of this pushing forward females to the detriment of males. We are going to over-index, and we're going to become the reverse of what's been done to us. But his comment was, why is this so important for women and versus what men are already doing? To your point, men have been great advocates of themselves. Mm-hmm. They've never been afraid to put themselves forward. So my answer, Jack, is actually, contrary to what I've written on Facebook, women are just catching up.
Oh my God, so true.
It is. We are just levelling the playing field. We are catching up. And it's not about pushing ourselves forward to the detriment of any other gender, whatever that identification might be. We're just levelling the playing field. Because as you said, we're 50% of the population.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, and this is what I think we need to fully own, unfortunately, that is going to mean that other people are going to have to step aside and create space. It is unfortunate.
That's why quotas were created, because sometimes you've got to force rank things to create the shift.
Without a doubt.
To the detriment of somebody in doing that until we can get the equilibrium.
Absolutely.
And that's the uncomfortable. And that's where the pushback comes. And that's where, this whole female empowerment is grating on men. So we've got to be bloody careful how we do it.
We do. And it's interesting, when I wrote the article in the AFR, a friend of mine who's in government and quite senior, and he said, look, it was a great article. He said, but I'm a bit tired of, women getting opportunities because they're women. And
instead of best person for job.
Correct. And I said to him, I am yet to meet a woman, a qualified woman, that wants a job for the sake of being a woman. But what I do meet is a lot of women who are overqualified that still don't get the opportunities, a lot of women who are overqualified that don't put themselves forward. And the other thing that I've recently learned about, which blew my mind, is this concept of the authority gap. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Oh, my goodness. So there is a researcher out of the US, and she's discovered the authority gap. And what it means is you will have a man that is qualified for a job, and you will have a woman that is equally as qualified for that job. And whether it is a woman or a man, they will always look at the man as the higher authority or having more authority to do that job. So a woman, when women say, I have to be twice as qualified, I have to work twice as hard for the same things.
It's not how they feel, it's reality.
It's the truth. And it's not just men who think men have more authority with equal qualifications. Women see the same thing.
Too.
Yeah. And so we are up against it, whether you like, this is an unconscious bias. We look at men and we see authority.
Just because it's always been that way.
Absolutely. So, and I think knowing that, like, awareness is the first step to any change. So whilst it is a bias and it exists, it is very helpful to know as a woman that you're not going crazy. This is the reality of the situation.
And then you've got to have broad shoulders for the pushback if you're a bit like you and I, where it's like, we're not going to be told. We're happy to call ourselves experts, and we're happy to be forthright and step forward. But to your point, I had in this studio a few months ago, Margot Foster, who is a champion of the boardroom, and exactly that point about equality or being represented as a female in the boardroom. And she said, I don't know any female who would accept a board role simply to change the quota in the room. And that's exactly right. You just wouldn't do it. Why would any female be stupid enough to do that?
And the other thing I find funny is that people go, oh, but, you don't want women just getting the job because she's a woman. I'm like, do you know how many men in my corporate career I came across that got the job because they were freaking a man? And they were completely incompetent. Often, I'm not saying, but bullies, sexual bullying, harassment.
And they've never been accused of sleeping their way to the top.
No, and often were paid to leave. So, you can look at it from two very different angles.
Yeah, the proactive redundancy. Yeah.
Proactive, I like that. Or promotion. I loved when, incompetence was promoted. I saw a lot of that in my time.
I bet you did. So what is the name of your research? Hidden
Figures, where are all the female experts?
And has that been released yet?
Yes. So it was released about 4 weeks ago now, and it has been, I would say, the most, in terms of the impact, one of the most successful things that I've ever done.
Oh, so congratulations
it's
on that.
Been extremely well received. It has gotten me a lot of opportunities to share the work, and the whole intent of it was to help, as I said, women reframe their relationship with the word expert, because the word often gives women the ick, which is why they will not claim it. They see it as very masculine. They see it as peacocking. Some women even said that when they say the word expert, they get a visual of a man's face. So think about that in the context of how it impacts our ability to be an expert. And so, yeah, it's out, and you can download it on my website, but there is a hell of a lot of recommendations.
Share that
in the
link
paper.
with me, Penny. I'll make sure that we've got it in the show notes, because I know there'll be listeners already wanting to read that. So
I'd love to.
Yeah, brilliant. So what's next? Hidden figures? Unhidden figures?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. I mean, always you do something magical and then you're like, oh my God, where do I go with this? So I'm currently reaching out to a number of universities. Even though I'm studying honours in psych, I finish in the middle of next year. They won't let me do my thesis on taking this work to the next level. It's not how the system works. Trust me, I've tried. So I'm looking to partner with a university to actually do the quantitative side of this research, to really put some hard data around what I've discovered and take the research and the findings to the next level. That's kind of it at the moment, because it's such a big
body of work. And there's a whole speaking circuit on this piece.
Oh, well, that's already kicked off. So, yeah, I've got to...
Yeah.
So a lot of large corporations. I mean, I've been an international speaker for the last 7 years, but I met with PwC, for example, yesterday. There's nothing like this body of work that exists. It's a completely different take on what holds women back. And so there's a lot of action around International Women's Day and sharing the findings of the research. But equally, there's no point in sharing the findings if
just with women.
Yeah, and that's
because that was going to be my question. I mean, and what that was my question. Are you being asked to present that in a global setting to their executive females, or are you being asked to present it to everybody?
So it's both, and you will find in the white paper, and this is where, again, it was a bit different. My recommendations are threefold. So in the white paper, I provide recommendations for women to actually reshape their relationship with the word expert. I provide recommendations for those who want to elevate women as experts, so advocates.
Yep.
And I equally provide recommendations for conference organisers, so anyone that has stages around the world, and for the media to actually provide more opportunities for women to own their voice and their expertise and practice doing so. When was the last time you went to a conference where they had an emerging expert sort of series, or any way for women who were emerging to actually get on a stage? We don't. It's only people that have been on the circuit for years that get the opportunities. So I want more diverse women, not just culturally diverse, because that was the other thing that came out of the research. A lot of women said there's not a lot of women that look like me in terms of my shape, my size, my disability. And so diversity looks and feels different. It's not just the colour of my skin.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, Penny, I haven't read the research yet, but I'm waiting for the link, and I'm going to. So thank you so much for joining me on The Power of Women today. Where can we find you?
Yes.
What's the website?
So the website's hackinghappy.co. I'm also pretty prolific and outspoken on the old LinkedIn as well. You'll just find me under my name.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for following the podcast. And I think this is a cracking episode to share with somebody else, because I feel like I'm an expert. You may not feel like you're an expert. Penny's definitely an expert, and it's a bloody great club. So thanks, Penny. Until next time.